More than 33 million Americans have lost their jobs in the past 7 weeks alone. That's roughly 1 in 5 of the workforce. It is a devastating turnaround for a country whose jobless rate was at a 50-year low just 8 weeks ago. Nick Bryant, who's in New York, has spent the night on the city's subway, a refuge for the poor and the vulnerable.
Midnight on the New York subway. Many of the city's homeless are bedding down for the night aboard its empty carriages. By day, the subway has become a virtual ghost train. By night, it's become a mobile shelter. In the first 5 carriages we went in, we found people in search of refuge and sleep. Many are newly unemployed. Some of them labourers who rent rooms by the week, unable now to pay their landlords. The COVID dispossessed.
A lot of homeless people are afraid to go to the shelters because there are so many people there in such confined spaces. They're worried about catching the coronavirus. Instead, they're taking their chances on the subway.
The subway could hardly be described as safe. More than 100 members of staff on New York's mass transit system have been killed by the coronavirus.
Last stop on arriving train, last stop, all passengers please, last stop.
This week New York did something it's never done before.
Last stop, all passengers exit this train.
Conducted a planned overnight shutdown of a subway system that's always operated round the clock. The aim is to disinfect the carriages, and so the NYPD has been evicting the homeless.
You know they're closing the subway tonight. They're going to be asking you to get off the train.
Charity workers and city officials were on hand to offer help and shelter.
It's the last stop, you have to step off.
But this woman had no idea where in the city she was.
Are you staying somewhere tonight? Do you have a shelter?
The confusion and anxiety written across her face. The destitute have been amongst New York's most vulnerable. Over the weekend, 2 homeless people were found dead on the subway.
Homeless people right now in New York City have a 50% higher mortality rate from COVID-19 than do housed New Yorkers. So by not offering people just something as simple as a hotel room where they can go and be safe and safe isolate, we're really relegating them to die.
It can feel like we're living in another time of buddy, can you spare me a dime? And just as the face mask has become the global symbol of this viral contagion, queues have become the marker of this economic catastrophe. Here the wait was for lunch at a shelter in Lower Manhattan.
Let's go, brother.
But it's not just the homeless anymore who are hungry. It's the newly jobless as well.
I have spoken with folks on this line who at the beginning of March were employed and now they're unemployed. And they're trying to figure out how to make ends meet. And so part of how they're doing that is to stand on this line at the Bowery Mission, pick up a to-go meal, and make ends meet that way.
Back on the subway, the woman we saw turned down the offer of emergency shelter and took the last train back into Manhattan. Others headed out into the night. Poverty has been a propagator of this pandemic. Hardship has been a super spreader. And for many, the phrase that best describes New York's life abundant, the city that never sleeps, must now sound like a taunt. Nick Bryant, BBC News, New York.
France will begin lifting what has been one of the harshest lockdowns in Europe from Monday. Most businesses will reopen and people will be allowed to leave home without carrying a permit. But the country is being colour-coded, with some areas like Paris having to wait longer than others for restrictions to be lifted. Lucy Williamson is in Paris for us. So how's this going to work?
Well, France, as you say, is going to be divided into 2 colour-coded zones, red and green. Here in Paris and the regions of the north, south and east, it's going to be red. That's where the virus is circulating. It's where the hospitals have seen more than 80% of their intensive care beds filled with coronavirus patients. Now, on Monday, when the lockdown starts to lift, you won't see many big differences between the 2 zones. Primary schools and shops will open across the country, or at least they'll start to, and people will be able to move freely up to 60 miles from their homes. But it's over the next few weeks that divisions could start to appear. You've got middle schools opening in the green zones only, and possibly in a few weeks' time, even cafes, bars and restaurants. The Prime Minister said he didn't want to think about a 2-speed France, but it could be, depending on what happens in the next few weeks, that that's where this plan is heading.
Lucy, thank you.